Hi, welcome back to Zoomers the podcast. I'm Isla,
I'm Eliana.
and today we're going to be talking about some controversial topics around Black Lives Matter, and we're going to be clarifying some things as well as sharing some opinions about this topic.
Yeah, so the Black Lives Matter movement officially began in 2013 following the death of Trayvon Martin, but it's really important to recognize that racial injustices are rooted in our American history and in our institutions, meaning that this racism is systematic and historic. So it's been going on for a very, very long time and kind of resurfacing for the first time in a while right about that.
Yeah, I think it's an issue that's definitely it's always been here, but I think because of the attention the media has drawn to it, that's why it's kind of resurfacing, and people are now putting more attention and effort into trying to solve this issue.
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and kind of break down some controversial topics slash terms. So we're gonna start with all lives matter. This has been debated because some people think that it shouldn't be prioritized and people think it should be the general opinion. So, so in our survey, we have a quote from Audrey. People who say all lives matter or blue lives matter are pretty ignorant in regards to their privilege. One way to demonstrate this is the house on fire example. If a house is on fire, that's the house that needs help. So although all houses matter, the house on fire is getting all the attention until it is no longer on fire. So what do we think about this?
I mean, personally, I agree with that, and I think it's a good example because when there's the problem, you need to fix the problem. I think some people, though, sometimes look at this. I don't know how some people take things differently, but personally, I think yes, I think attention should be definitely given to the main issue. I think there are some people who are or maybe this is just me, but I feel like some people think to make progress, you have to bring others down in the process. And so I don't think in this example nobody's being brought down, but I just want to say I feel like I see this in plenty of other places, in our communities over other topics where people are always trying to bring down other people in order to bring up other people. And I just want to say because this is just my opinion and it's just really something that's really important to me. I think you need to bring everyone up and help everyone, and you don't need to bring others down in the process. And I think this is a great example of how to explain this information and convey that message.
Yeah, I think that our American, culture, and a lot of us have that win-lose mentality. Like only one group can really be benefited, but we have to kind of recognize that it should be a win-win situation. Yeah, I think that competitiveness that drives us as Americans kind of plays into this. So yeah, it's not anyone's fault that they need to be not constantly but often validated in order to, I don't know, feel important. So in the light of this movement, I do think that some people might feel like they aren't important, I guess, which is why they're bringing up the all lives matter thing. So yeah, I think that's a good point, that people think that only one group can be helped at a time, which is really not the case. So the opposite opinion from all lives matter is that all lives matter cannot be true until Black lives matter, and that logically makes sense because Black lives are part of all lives. All lives can't matter until Black lives matter. So I completely get that logic, and I think that's valid as well.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Okay, so another topic that is very controversial, at least from what I've seen, is that all cops are bad. And for me personally, I think there's a lot of corruption in the police systems and the in the United States, forces that have a lot of power through weapons and violence. And so and that's why I think within the system it's really messed up, but I don't think it's correct to say that all cops are bad. And you can't really put a blanket statement over an entire big population of people and say this is what every single person is like, because that's saying every single person in this country must like fruit. Like that's just unrealistic. Like I know people who don't like fruit. Like you can't just make such a blanket statement about huge amounts of people. Yes, there have been like lots of cops that have been like poorly treating people and not following their morals, I guess, and like not doing what's right in life and everything. But I think you can't say that for every single cop ever. I think the system, yes, is really messed up, but not the people within it are all like that.
I see. Okay. I think that the statement is justified in that there are enough of those terrible incidents that people fear for their own safety. So, like, I don't know, like, you ever heard, like, I don't, better be safe than sorry, that kind of thing? Like, that's the kind of, like, mentality I'm going for. And, like, I think all cops are bad is something that, like, could be taught to, like, younger people, like, younger kids, because just like stranger danger, right? Like, they're gonna like put a blanket statement over everyone that like kids don't know just to prevent like incidents from happening. And it's kind of like the same idea in that they want to protect people. I do get your point that like obviously like not all cops are like this, and there are a lot of instances, especially during protests, where cops are like helping and like being super respectful of the protesters. So yeah, it really depends. But I think all cops are bad, the statement is justified because there's supposed to be a trust there between like the law enforcer and the people, and like that's now been broken, especially with the Black community. So yeah, I think it's really really debatable, but I do think that it's okay like right now.
I mean, I guess just like for me, because this is just who I am as a person, I'm like one of the most paranoid people ever. So like I don't really put trust into anything other than really myself, because like how can you trust a group of people to always make the right decisions in life and always do what is right? Like you don't know what they're going to do and stuff. So I've never really put trust into like our government and government issued agencies like the police, I guess. And so like I don't know, I guess maybe I just have paranoia in general around police. Like I feel like a lot of times, like even before this whole thing happened, people like if something happens, they're like, oh, just call the police, they'll help you out. Like there have been so many times where the police do not help you out and they just like make it worse. Like I think I saw like a bunch of stats online because there's been a lot of things circulating, and the police just really don't do the job correctly. And I think honestly what needs to be done to make changes is, and a lot of people have started doing this, which is great, but people have been reaching out to like police stations and stuff that don't already have this as a rule, but they like make it required to have like body cameras and stuff, and they're sending things in that for that. And I think that's a really good way to actually make a change that will be helpful by like requiring that, so that more likely bad things won't happen if there's like cameras as evidence to be like, hey, you did this, that's not great, you're gonna go to jail. Like so I think that's a one way to help make a change. And I think in general there can be other things that can be done, like more training for police officers, and not like having such like I think like they, maybe this is just me, but I think it could be beneficial for them to like take like anger management courses because like I don't know, I see a lot of, and I think honestly more jobs should require like anger management to be like a skill, coping skill, because I see that in a lot of areas. And yeah, I think there's that the whole system just needs to be changed in general for how cops work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Um, yeah, I completely get that point, and I'm gonna argue from my opposite perspective now. Like, I don't condone this, I guess, but all cops are bad is argued to be another form of marginalization and like instilling fear like against cops, but at the same time, and I'm arguing from like the other perspective, um, like imagine that for centuries and centuries. Like that's that like marginalization idea is the exact same thing that's been happening to people of color, especially African Americans, for the longest time. So it's kind of like, I don't know, like it's now reversed or whatever through the statement, even though obviously it's been going on for a lot shorter. And arguing from the well, like my side, or the side that I lean towards, like cops take on those risks and the responsibilities that come with the job, and they, you know, they choose that job, right? So they're supposed to protect the people and prioritize people's safety. So like the actions that I've seen like in videos and stuff, or like in the protests, that are more violent and kind of harming people who pose no threat, that just kind of goes against their entire, you know, mission. Obviously that isn't everybody, but yeah, we kind of have to recognize that we can't, like it's, in my opinion, it's more ethical or more moral to marginalize or kind of put a blanket statement over the cops than African Americans who did not choose the color of their skin, or they were just born into it, right? So yeah, I don't know. Like it's just, it's really in the air still, for me at least. But I like, we have to take all those factors and then form your own opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. I think another thing I wanted to add, I was blanking out on this before, but now I remember like what I was gonna say. I also think that like, I don't know, I just think that like a lot of like military force type things and like police, they kind of fall under that category, like things like that, with kind of government agency things. Like I just feel like where they have a lot of power, I feel like a lot of it could just change. And I feel like something else that's also kind of important to look at is kind of the defunding of the police, because a lot of times when there is an issue, it is immediately rooted to the police. And I don't think that's really helpful and beneficial, because especially like when I was at Star Vista and we were learning about like people with mental health issues and stuff, a lot of times like they'll like the police will try and deal with them, but they just don't know how to deal with that type of thing. And so I think before like looking straight to the police and that being the one thing that is there, I think there other problems can be rerouted to other sources that will actually be more beneficial to solving the problem. And so I think that's also something that should be taken into account, to specifically in the USA, if that's not already obvious, because I can't really speak for other countries, but that's what I personally believe.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. So on that note, we're gonna move on to the concept, the term, the topic of white privilege. So we're gonna start off by reading a couple of quotes from our survey. This one is from an anonymous teenager. I think that as a white person myself, it's easy to not feel white privilege. And it's the easy thing to ignore the racism around us and kind of ignore it. A lot of my white friends complain about always being under fire, and honestly, I kind of get it. Okay, I'm not sure how to comprehend this quote, or this idea, I guess. Do you have any takes on this?
I mean, I kind of agree that it's easier not to feel white privilege when you're white, because when you're a part of a group that gets privilege, I think a lot of people don't really recognize that
Right.
and they take it for granted. Um, I don't know. Maybe I think definitely when I was a lot younger, I definitely did not notice my privilege at all. But I think I noticed pretty early on when I saw like privilege, white privilege, because I've just been at a lot of situations where I've seen myself get more privilege over other kids in some places, like even at like airports and stuff. And every time I see it, I get so pissed off. Like like when I'm in the airport, I just want to be like, why don't you scan me? Why don't you think I'm suspicious? Like I literally want to like go up to them and be like that, because it like makes me so mad and it's just really frustrating. And I don't know. I'm just it's a thing that is real, and I think when you're a part of a privileged group, you just don't recognize it. And I think I've realized that more lately, because like areas where I guess I'm like more oppressed because of other things, like I realize that, but like other people who don't feel that oppression, they don't realize that. So I feel like it's hard to recognize a privilege unless you're the oppressed one, because I feel like just and maybe this is just a USA thing, or maybe this is a worldwide thing, but I just see that a lot here, where people just take for granted what they have, and I think that's why people don't see their privileges.
So if you are white or you have privilege, it's something that's part of your life. It's not, like something you actively notice every day.
Yeah, and I think for people who are against the Black Lives movement, is those people just are against it because they're racist, because I didn't really see any other really explanations that are plausible, because like the people who have like argue and they try and make like things sound reasonable, like at the end of the day I feel like it's just because you're racist and you can't really justify that. And so I feel like if we want to like solve this issue, you have to help educate people. And these people who are racist, they've like been raised in like kind of environments where that's just like what's kind of expected of them in a way, because like their whole family's kind of has some sort of racism. So then you're gonna kind of grow up with that ideal, and you're not gonna really think too much about it, because that's what you just see as like normal, because that's what's normalized in your group and your surroundings, I guess. So I think the best you can just do is to help educate these people and teach them that racism is not okay, and everyone should be treated equally and not based off what they look like.
Yeah, exactly. And while white privilege is historical, it's still around and benefiting white people. So kind of like saying that it doesn't exist is completely invalid, because it's everywhere around us. It's like in your jobs, in schools, in, I don't know, like the economy, I guess. That's a very general term, but it's really everywhere. So if anyone is saying that it doesn't exist, just, I don't know, take a step back and look at it one more time. Maybe you're not noticing it because you don't directly experience it, or it's just kind of a part of your everyday routine. So that's why you don't notice it, So,
Yeah.
and on the other side of the spectrum, I guess, like people who aren't Black, who are supporting Black Lives Matter and aren't racist and are educating themselves, that doesn't mean that you don't have privilege. It means that you're recognizing that privilege and exercising for the greater good. So yeah, like I think a privilege in itself to be educating yourself on racism rather than directly experiencing it. So I think that's a pretty different way to look at it. So maybe that'll help anybody kind of come to terms with privilege.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that.
Thank you. So move on. The big case, I guess, or the controversy, this case began with the George Floyd incident, or murder, I guess. So a quick update for anyone who's not keeping tabs. The cop who killed George Floyd, his charges were up to second-degree murder. And yeah, so do we think justice was served in this case?
Um, I don't know. I think the whole justice system is kind of messed up, in my opinion. And I just have personal opinions about the whole justice system in the United States and punishments in general. So I guess it was served. I don't really know how to feel about it. I don't know. Do you have like an opinion on it?
Kind of expanding what you like just said about like the justice system just being corrupt in general, or not corrupt, but just not great. Especially, I was really nervous about this case, or I didn't have the greatest greatest expectations, just because the justice system is literally like it targets Black individuals as criminals, and I just didn't have the greatest feeling about this, especially since historically, you know, if you are, let's say, like someone who is arrested, you can go for a plea bargain and plead guilty for less time, or you can go to trial. And especially if you are wrongfully accused, like that's just the bargain you have to make. And especially like with the whole race factor, it just is like the people of color get the raw end of things, and it's just not a good system. So that's why I was really kind of anxious for this case. But especially considering that the cop who did kill George Floyd, his original charges were third-degree murder, which means not intentional. Like, that kind of thing is given to reckless drivers who accidentally get in car crashes. Like, that's not what he was doing. That's his like his kneeling on his neck was not, I don't think that's even comparable to reckless driving. So I do think the upping of the charge was just, but I don't know, like, this whole thing is just it doesn't seem like enough when you factor in like how this has been happening so much. So yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't think it would be a big case if we hadn't seen like that one video, if like everyone hadn't seen that. And so that kind of,
Yeah.
you know, because like how many cases are there like this that weren't on video? And therefore, like, those cops are walking around like with no charges. You know, it's just scary to think about.
Yeah, and bringing it back to, like, Trayvon Martin, like, the whole, like, guy who was killed that kind of started this off, I just kind of did a little bit of research today. I don't really know much about, like, because the guy who killed him, his name is, like, Zimmerman or whatever. I don't really know much about, like, what happened there, but I was researching, like, what happened to Zimmerman and, like, the charges. He was, like, not charged at all. He completely went free. And there was this article written in 2019 talking about how Zimmerman had the audacity to sue Trayvon Martin's family, saying that they, for $100 million, for saying that they put like this conspiracy theory on him about how he killed their son, and like how dare they like put this on him, and like it's uprooted his life slightly. Not really though, because he was accused and he still like was charged not guilty. But he like tried to sue them, and obviously he has like nothing to support him, so like this like thing did not pass and he didn't actually sue them. But like the audacity that he had to like try and sue them, like I just think that's ridiculous. And he's trying to get money out of killing someone, or just like the whole system, it's just so bad. Like, I'm glad nothing happened, because if something had happened, that would have been just like ridiculous.
Exactly. And during like the original case where he did kill Martin, he pled self-defense, which I don't know, like Trayvon was unarmed, just walking through a neighborhood, and Zimmerman was the one who actually followed him and pursued him while he was walking like in the opposite direction. So I don't understand that whole thing. Like, if you were fearful for your life, why would you follow the supposed threat? So that just doesn't add up for me. And like that I don't know, it just makes me kind of sick to think about that. So yeah, I don't know how, like, it's obvious, you obviously can't like do like a racist tally and like count up all the racists in this country. Like, I wish that was a thing, because then we could deal with that. But yeah, it makes me really scary to think about how many cases have gone like unsolved, and how many of those cases like hurt someone because of racism.
It just honestly, it just makes me really, really upset about the amount of power that some people have, and how this is why, like, obviously there's not really a perfect government system, but like this is why, like, without like checks and balances that we have in like democracy, obviously that's not like the best, like there's still problems within checks and balances, but like, and there's clearly still problems like power checks that need to be taken in this country. So it just is really upsetting to me when there are some people who just still have a ton of power, because if there is nothing to check that, people often abuse it. Like, you wouldn't think you as a person would abuse power if you had a lot of it, but honestly, like when you get so much power, it can be so overwhelming that like honestly, like somebody will probably mess up and do something. And so that's why like it should really be taken into account, like how much power police have right now, and that power should be really diluted and held more back. And yeah,
Sure.
that needs to be solved.
Really need to, I don't know, like keep account of that, and like hold people more accountable for violence or their racist actions. So yeah, that's the gist of the George Floyd case. And he really sparked the recent protests and the recent activism. and serves as the face of this new wave of Black Lives Matter movement. So moving on to the protests, people often argue about how like the violence or the rioting, I guess, is justified versus not justified, even though the majority of the protests were completely peaceful. And I guess my take on it is that some of the some of the rioting and like the rowdy aspects of the protests are justified, in that peaceful protests have proven ineffective, like throughout history in this specific movement, and like with like a lot of other causes. So I think, well, within certain boundaries, like the rowdiness of protests can be justified.
Okay, this is where I completely have a differing opinion from you. Personally, I guess I'm just more of a person that one of a value that's just important to me is peace, and I've seen plenty of times where peace has worked. Yes, I think violence also works too, and I think you can be peaceful about it. I think the thing is, though, that violence is the easy out. It's the easy way for often people to throw people out of power. But I think a lot of times in history, there have also been times where violence has been used and it's just created more problems. Like, for example, in South Africa, Nelson Mandela, he advocated peacefully towards getting rid of racial segregation, and his efforts helped South Africa to go a long way. And the reason why their country right now, this is like something that can, I feel like everyone kind of thinks, like their country is clearly, there's a lot of issues and corruption in South Africa right now. And the reason why this exists is because Nelson Mandela was trying to progress forward peacefully, and then in his like progression of trying to like get more rights for Black people in his country, there a lot when that was happening, after like a good amount of time, a lot of Black on Black violence started occurring, which started kind of reversing some of his effects that were done. And so like that's an example where peace worked and like violence did not help, and it like reversed the situation. And like to me, I'm just a person, I don't think there's a lot of examples. I think there's a lot of examples where violence has worked in history, because I think it's just seen as the easy out. And like if you have power and if you're killing people, people are going to listen to you. But I think things can also be accomplished peacefully. Yes, it may be harder, I guess, but to me, I don't think violence is really justified in any sort of situation. And I think even if it takes a lot of work, you can still accomplish things peacefully. And then there's other examples like Gandhi, the women's suffrage movement. Obviously, there's also examples where things have failed too, but there's also been successes.
Right. Very, very, very small part of protests have gotten violent. It's only because, and the only instances I know of are because police got involved and like there was a, I don't know, confrontation sort of thing. But I guess people are concerned about looting. And I do think that looting kind of demeans the whole point of the protest. I can kind of see how damaging property can be justified when you're kind of looking at the whole grand scheme of things and how lives have literally been taken from people, and how we're trying to combat that and get people's attention by destroying property, I guess. But when people start attacking smaller businesses, that's where like you would draw the line completely. And I think that like the looters too aren't really part of the protest, or shouldn't be part of the protest if that's what they're in it for, I guess. And like there are a lot of instances where like the actual protesters who are genuinely fighting for the cause are like stopping the looters because they don't want to get like a bad rep from the media, because the media can twist them and like have the whole thing like come spiraling down. So yeah, I'm gonna read a quote from Hannah. Although it is understandable that the protesters are being violent at this time, I think that sometimes it's important to be peaceful to avoid violence in return. It's also necessary to use peaceful methods to protest so that the government isn't given an excuse to claim discredit or punish protesters for their violence.
Yeah, and I agree with using I don't know. And then this is also just kind of my opinion on like the whole looting thing and damaging property. I don't know. I'm just a person who my like personal views on life is like don't damage things, like build. I guess it's just like I find this funny and kind of ironic in my life because I'm such a negative, detrimental person to myself. But like in the heart of things, like my personal core values are you should just build things up and not break them down. Like I just think like first of all, like damaging property is just taking away from the whole idea of the protest, and it's kind of unnecessary in my opinion, because like I get where people are coming from on how it can like help express the movement, but like I just don't think it's really helpful and really productive to do that, and change can be brought in other peaceful ways. And it's just like frustrating to me because I just personally think that you don't have to like break things down to create change.
Yeah. Yeah, I can kind of see that too. I could never see myself looting or like destroying property. But for a cause like this, where like honestly enough is enough, I can see where people are coming from, like completely. I'm like, and I honestly kind of support it, just because like, how else are we gonna get people to listen?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like things can be accomplished peacefully and then they are more powerful in that way. I think it's hard. And I personally also think a lot of the reason why like things have turned violent when they have is just maybe this is just my personal opinion, but I think through quarantine and cooping everyone up in their houses, people have a lot of energy that haven't been put into outlets that they normally have. Like a lot of my friends have sports that they normally play that they're not playing right now, and I've definitely noticed a lot more aggression with them and within myself, which is why I've been trying to run more, because I think I've had so much pent up anger at least recently. And so I think in like the protests, some people, like if they're encouraged, they've kind of been taking it out violently and they're kind of using it as an excuse of we're trying to get attention. I don't know. I just feel like protests people sometimes use it as excuses just so they can act out. And I just feel like people are just really not taking things out in the right way. I don't know. I just feel like this is an example of why quarantine has just not been the best for everyone, and it's causing a lot of problems, and it is only taking account into people's physical health and not really their mental health. And honestly, it's not really even taking to people's physical health, because when you shut down parks so people can't get exercise, they're not going to be healthy physically, and then they can't fight off viruses. But that's just like my personal opinion on like everything that's been going on. Honestly, just like all the problems that our society has, it's just really like frustrating. And like I feel like they're all just being dug up now because people are like really frustrated with everything. And I'm just really frustrated with how everything's being dealt with kind of. And so I really think it's great that like the peaceful protests, like I think those are really great. And I really hope that they do make progress. And I feel like they have, because I've looked at the effects that they've made. And so I hope that the protests continue to be peaceful, because I think they do have, they really can make change.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that, and I kind of form my, I guess, my own rule of thumb now from discussing with you. Like, okay, so like baseline, everything should be peaceful. Like violence isn't necessary until I don't know, until you are faced with violence, I guess, like for self-defense. And this is sometimes the case. I've seen videos of cops like firing rubber bullets or tear gassing peaceful protesters, and that's obviously an extreme case.
I was just gonna that I just think there's a lot of issues, and honestly it's just really hard to solve them all, and so I guess you just kind of have to focus at like one at a time, or maybe you can juggle them all at once. Honestly, I just think that like Black Lives Matters is definitely something that's really important and should definitely be prioritized, and we really need to solve all these issues in our system.
Exactly. Okay. And there are obviously many other ways to support the cause, especially in our generation. Many of us, well, yeah, a lot of us are participating in social media, like raising awareness there. Many people participated in Blackout Tuesday, and here's a quote from Hannah. Blackout Tuesday was meaningful, but was not a factor of change in this scenario. So, okay, how do you want to respond to this?
I kind of agree. I think that the only thing it really does is like helps to raise awareness and also show that you're kind of an ally to the cause because like also I think this was more of a I know there's people who participated in it internationally, but I think it was more of a USA thing because I mean I don't have like too many friends from outside of the US, but I don't think and also like I follow some like influencers outside of the US and I think it was more of I saw at least it was more of a thing in the US. And I don't know. I don't really feel like it changed that much, really.
I guess like that shows that you are an ally, and that's great. But I didn't really see like any sort of like any sort of change factor in those posts, especially if there's like no caption or anything, you know?
Yeah.
You're just like a black square.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
because like oh, and also like so many people at least that I follow participated in it, and I feel like when you go on your feed and you see lots of black squares, which is great and stuff, I feel like you don't really like look at it though, and you're just kind of like scrolling, and you're like, okay, great, whatever. Like I feel like I get the understanding behind it, and I think like it is meaningful, like Hannah said, but it didn't really do anything, in my opinion, really.
I kind of see that too. There was actually a sort of an attack on this Black Lives Matter like trend. People were using the hashtag All Lives Matter and posting white squares. And that hashtag, okay, I just want to say this because it's kind of funny, but our generation's K-pop fandom like flooded that hashtag with like pictures of like K-pop idols like within the hour. So I don't know. We're very creative.
Really? I did not know that.
It's so funny. You should look it up because there's no more blog posts under that. It's just all like fan cams and stuff. So yeah, we're very, very creative, and I respect that so much. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways to respond to this cause. You can be posting fan cams. A lot of people are posting educational resources and like petitions and places to donate, and that's honestly amazing. And other people are posting art and music resources and raising awareness. What do we think about like influencers and their kind of role in this movement?
I mean, I think some influencers have definitely been helping to spread awareness. I don't really follow too many influencers on Instagram, but the ones that I have, they've spoken out and said stuff about it and showing their support. So I think that's great that they do that and show that it's something that matters, that's important to them.
Yeah. I also saw a couple of like, I don't know, scandals and stuff, or like things that weren't as good because influencers were kind of hopping on the trend rather than like seeming really genuine about like caring about this movement. And I think this is kind of something that we see in a lot of our generations and some people I follow, just because I can't see, um, I don't know, like posting a black square, it doesn't obviously doesn't spark change, and I'm sure a lot of people who posted those squares are like went ahead and donated it or signed petitions, and that's great. But I do think this, like on social media at least, like Black Lives Matter is turning into more of a hashtag slash trend or movement, and that's not a good thing at all. So I just wanted to draw attention to that and kind of, I don't know, confront it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't like no one said anything to me about this, so like I'm sure, but like I don't know if people are wondering about this because I didn't participate in like posting a black square. But the only reason why I didn't really do anything like that, and because like I feel like there's been like lots of things that have happened in the past. And I tend to not really like participate, I guess, in them. Like for example, the Australia fires, the shootings at synagogues. Like I don't really post about like any of those things because I feel like at the end of the day, maybe this is just like my view, and I don't like. I guess this could perceive like as like I'm a bad person. I don't. I guess, but like I feel like once you like post about one issue, you're kind of obliged to post about them all in a way because like when you post about something and somebody else has an issue that's really important to them, like if you post about like the shootings of Black people, but you're not posting about the shootings at synagogues, people are like, well, why do they matter more than like the shootings at synagogues? And then like they'll come back with that. So like I just try like not really to be on the media. Like in person, if you want to have a conversation with me about it, like I'll totally talk about my viewpoints and like why I think a certain way. But like on the media, I just try and like keep my personal views to like myself in a way, which I guess, because like I don't know, I feel like there's already so many people like posting about it, and like I just feel like in a world I don't make that much of a difference, and I would feel bad if I started to post about like something about a problem and then like other problems were not like I wouldn't be addressing them. Like I just would feel bad, and like I'm not giving equal attention. And I just like say this once again, I just like there's so many problems, and like I don't know, spreading awareness is only the first step, and there's so much more you have to do to actually solve the problem.
I completely understand that viewpoint, I guess. I didn't post Black Swan either. And I don't really know my reason behind it. I just thought that it's not that like, it's obviously not that I don't care or anything. I didn't want to come across that way at all. But I just didn't see what it would do, especially considering that like I posted on my story earlier about the cause, and like we're doing this episode, and I think, and like I've donated and signed petitions, and I don't feel the need to broadcast that to everybody because everyone's going to respond differently. I don't think it's fair to like call out people either. I've seen this on people's stories and stuff. People are like calling each other out for not posting enough, or like saying like things that are like, it's disgusting that people like aren't posting about this. And I'm like, posting about things like doesn't mean that you don't care about certain things. It kind of just means that you aren't as willing to share your political opinions, or I don't know, because everyone deals with things in different ways. Like they could be like deep in thought, you know, like writing a novel about this. Like that doesn't mean that they care less. That probably means they care more, but it's just not as like broadcasted as much. So yeah.
No, 100% agree with that. Like people just deal with things in different ways, and you shouldn't shame them. The best you can just do is to like keep educating and keep everyone understanding of where our society is at and where it should be at.
Yeah, I do think our generation is very, very good at that. I've seen like a lot of like people calling each other out, like people calling like racist people out, and like not like canceling them, but like kind of like coming together and educating them. Sometimes like pretty snarkily, but like But yeah, so I guess the real question we have to answer is how can we solve this problem? And I think myself, as well as a lot of us, were kind of shocked into activism after seeing the George Floyd video. I know that's the case for me. And after watching like other videos and reading more articles about this case and similar cases, I began like being more interested in this and wanted to take action. So this is definitely a result of systematic racism and social norms. And like Isla said earlier, like to completely eradicate this, we have to kind of call for a cultural reset and educate people like from the ground up. I think this honestly starts in like elementary schools. Of course, you aren't born racist, or you're not like seeing the color of each other's skin. And it's just kind of something, I don't even know. I was never taught like the different stereotypes and things, but somehow I came to know them, even though I was never like directly taught them or told them. So it's embedded in our culture. It might not be obvious, but it's there.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. And I also like, this is another thing that really frustrates me. I think like the media industry, like in terms of like movies, TV shows and stuff, it's been so dominated, by white people, but also majority of men. And I think if you want to create change, like a good way, this is one good way, like you need to like change what's presented in the media and types of like, because people look up to TV shows as like role models, and so you need to have like more diversity in like shows and stuff, and not just see like this white man who did this great thing. And like I mean there's more females, kind of. The stats are still completely low, especially with directors. The majority of directors of all these films are white and males. So like I just think there needs to be more diversity in some of these industries, especially when like the whole entire population like will watch these shows and be like affected by them. And so like and like they really do. Like I know like in past like movies I watched have really actually like taken a huge like impact on my life, and like that's all that was important to me. So I think by like changing like those media sources and entertainment and showing that like everyone's a part of it, I guess, and putting more diversity into it, that's another way to help.
Yeah, and I kind of get frustrated too by this because, like, people sometimes praise certain shows that, like, have, I don't know, a seemingly diverse cast or, like, have a person of color on the show. But, like, within the show, like, they're a stereotypical, like, version of a certain character. And, like, they're, like, it's, like, the same thing, like, over and over.
Yeah.
It's, like, a certain character type that can only, like, be portrayed by a person of color. And ones that are, like, full people of color casts, like, are shows or movies that are only about, like, that race, you know, like, I don't know how to describe it, like instances.
No, I get what you're saying, and
Yeah, like,
I
yeah, like, there's Crazy Rich Asians for, like, the Asian American thing, like, that's all about being Asian, like, it's not, like, I don't know, like, like, it's just, like, a normal movie, if that makes any sense, like, just, like, a normal plot or whatever. And then, like, 12 Years a Slave was, like, the biggest, like, or Black Panther, like, those things, I don't know, like, they're just part of, like, African American culture that, like, the general population kind of can relate to or is familiar with. So that kind of just makes me mad because, like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the best representation. So I do think a lot of, like, internal racism or, like, prejudice comes from media, like, from, like, when you're really, really little.
yeah, and it's such a huge influence. So it really needs to be changed.
Yeah. So we're gonna move on a little bit, and so obviously solving this problem, we have some ideas like changing the media or kind of like evolving our education system. So I personally, I don't want to be super negative or anything, but I don't think it's gonna change during either of our lifetime, just because um, the problem here is with those individuals who are racist. Some of those individuals, or like racist individuals, are like in positions of leadership. Like that's what's making all this, like, all these problems. And even like people who are racist and aren't in positions of leadership, they're still part of the problem, obviously. So, and since I personally like have come across or know people who have racist views, and like it's a lot more than you would think too. Especially, okay, so at my school recently, there was a huge scandal because some like senior guys who had already graduated, like class of 2020, but they had a meme page that was extremely racist, and they were caught. They were pictures of them like doing blackface and like saying the N-word. So I don't know, like that just like within my school community, I didn't know about. So kind of obviously it scares me about like other people who might not like look like or seem like they're racist and they actually hold those ideals. I think something to be aware about and like going forward, you know?
Yeah.
I see that a lot. Like there is a hashtag on Twitter, like expose my school, or like hashtag expose MIDI, which is a different school in my district. And yeah, it's just most of it is microaggressions in those hashtags, but a lot of it can be full out racism. So yeah, and even like within minorities too, like I've experienced, well, I'm not experienced, but I've seen like fellow Asian Americans like saying the N-word and being like colorist, or like full on racist. So I don't know, like it's just a problem that's everywhere, and we have to take careful steps to eradicate it, and it's not going to take like a short amount of time. So I don't think it's going to be gone within my lifetime, because there's people my age who are racist, and they're always going to live as long as I am. So That's my take on it.
I agree with that. I think it's a problem that's going to take a long time to work on if it's been here for so long, but hopefully we can make progress and at least start to make changes to uh, create a better society.
Like we saw like a couple years ago with Obama as president, a Black president, racism wasn't like gone. It was still around. So especially with the president we have now and the leadership we have now, it's not a surprise to me that racism is like becoming more of a problem. I hate to leave on that depressing note, but yeah, I hope that this helps people formulate their own opinions and think more about this. Yeah, so we hope this problem is eradicated sooner than later, and that people are able to educate themselves, because like we said, that's like one of the major factors. So yeah, stay safe and think hard, I guess. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.